everyone. I hope that you all are staying safe and managing okay during this time. Something that has been weighing heavily on the hearts of many during this pandemic is how to manage the death of a loved one. Today, I'm going to discuss with you different ways we experience grief, how to handle the losses during this challenging time, and how to help someone who is grieving. Losing a loved one at any point in our lives is difficult, but during this time of COVID-19, it is particularly painful when someone we love dies. Recently, so many people in our community have lost spouses, parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, siblings, children, and other family members and close friends. Many people were not able to have those final moments or days of being with their loved ones. And those opportunities we know to hold our loved ones' hands, to give them a final kiss, to say what we need to say to them, or just simply being with them brings a tremendous amount of peace during the grieving process. However, given our pandemic, these opportunities were not afforded to many people in our community, and so many are hurt because of the lack of having these final moments. Additionally, many people have lost loved ones outside of the US, and they were unable to come together for a funeral and grieve together. One of the strengths and I think traditions of our Indian community is that we come together physically to mourn the death of a loved one. However, this pandemic has really limited those opportunities. It is important to remember what resources we do have available to us during this time to help us cope with the death of loved ones. People are showing a tremendous amount of creativity and flexibility during this time by hosting Zoom prayer services, live streaming funerals, and other virtual events to honor their loved ones. Although nothing replaces those in-person moments, it is important to know that we're doing the best that we can. It is also important to recognize that everyone deals with loss differently. People who lose a loved one during this time can have what researchers call ambiguous loss, which is associated with the sense of helplessness, lack of closure, a sense of things being unfair, or frustration. And it is not uncommon that during these times, a person might experience prolonged mourning. So it might take the person longer to heal, and the feelings might be more intense. And that's perfectly normal under these circumstances. Grief typically impacts us in 4 different ways: emotionally, physically, cognitively, and behaviorally. And it's important to know what's normal, because when we are grieving, how we respond in these 4 areas might feel unfamiliar or foreign to us. Family members and loved ones of the bereaved might have persistent longing and sadness. There might be feelings of numbness, anxiety, fear of not being able to survive without that loved one, shock, apathy. People can sometimes even feel angry or frustrated at the bereaved, other family members and friends, or the current climate. It is important to know what's underneath the anger is usually hurt, and to try not to displace this anger onto anyone. And if you do, recognize it. It is normal to feel helpless and lost at this time. Some people might have a sense of relief that the loved one is no longer suffering. And sometimes with that relief, guilt tags along, and you immediately tell yourself, I shouldn't feel that way. But it's normal to want the people that you love to be at peace and not feel pain any longer. Guilt is also an emotion that most people feel during this time. We feel guilt because we believe we've neglected a duty or an obligation that we have. So we entertain these thoughts of I should have, or I could have, or I wish. And I can't emphasize this enough, but guilt is a rabbit hole that we can't come out of if we entertain it too much. We need to actively work on reminding ourselves that we did everything that we could, and so much was out of our control during this time. You need to say this to yourself, or have someone you love say this to you and remind you of this. Remember that hindsight is always 2020, and there's so much that we didn't know, but it's so important to show compassion for ourselves. In regards to our feelings, it's important to acknowledge all our feelings and know that if it's left unaddressed, it can lead to other risks and more problems down the line. Physically, people might have difficulty breathing. There might be weakness in the muscles, a lack of energy. Grief also impacts our cognitions and our thoughts. Oftentimes, people are left with this disbelief that did the person really die? It didn't really happen. It is a dream. Maybe the person is just away. And it comes along with the sense of depersonalization, that nothing seems real. And we have the sense of, everything is surreal. The life is moving along around us, and we're in this kind of stuck state or surreal state. There might be also feeling, thoughts of confusion, memory difficulties, persistent thoughts about the person who died, rumination, and a desire to keep talking about the bereaved. And this is perfectly appropriate, and you should want to discuss your loved one in ways that make sense to you and feel comfortable to you. Finally, grief can impact our behaviors. People might have trouble going to sleep. They might have trouble staying asleep. So they might end up waking up periodically through the night or wake up early. They might wake up with intense sadness, with nightmares or dreams about the person that they just lost. And with time, this gradually corrects itself and decreases. There also might be instances of overeating or undereating, a desire not to be around people like before, more crying or unexplained crying, visiting places or looking at pictures or objects that remind you of the loved one that you lost. And all of this is normal and should be understood within the context of grief. Sometimes people want to avoid everything and just don't want to talk to anyone about the grief process. And that's understandable as well. But you want to try to find someone that you trust and someone who will be there to listen. It is also very important to remember that mourning is a process that we all handle very differently. Not everyone experiences the same thing, and how we've handled previous losses, our attachment in relationships, and how we are conditioned to discuss emotions can all impact our grieving process. Remember that healing does not occur in a linear pattern. There might be moments when you feel things are manageable and other moments when you can barely get out of bed. It is literally a moment-to-moment process, especially in the beginning. Grieving occurs in phases where you move in and out of different feelings. And you have to remind yourself when you're going through those feelings that it's all normal and that you can get through this. It is important to accept where you are in each moment and continue on that journey. Take your time and heal at your own pace. It is important not to compare your grief to another person's grief experience. Most people are still feeling strong loss and emotions well into a year after the grief of their loved one. This does not mean that there might not be times of relief from the pain, but expect that there might be a roller coaster of different emotions. Research also shows that anniversary reactions are common for 10 years or longer. You also have to recognize that if you've experienced a loss during this time, that is a significant loss, and you've experienced it in a very unusual and challenging time. Denying the loss or feelings around that loss does not decrease the pain, but instead prolongs the suffering and can lead to more problems in the future. Accept all of your feelings, even feelings that you're not familiar with or don't like. Sometimes in our community, only certain emotions are accepted or expressed. It is important to acknowledge that these feelings exist and you're going through them, and to express it appropriately to people we trust and that understand us. Be gentle with yourself. After the loss of my mom, one of my fellow psychologists and dear friends told me that I need to handle myself with kid gloves. This was probably one of the best pieces of advice that I received. You have to remember that you're very vulnerable and you have to give yourself space and time to process. This is not the time to take on extra tasks or responsibilities or, more obligations. You want to surround yourself with people you know will be gentle with your feelings and can accept your feelings. Expect that certain smells, places, songs, foods, and even other people might trigger sadness again. And this is normal. For those of you who might be going back to India after a period of time, that first trip back where your loved one's not there is going to be very difficult. And the days leading up to that trip might be painful and stressful. And that's normal. And you want to make sure that you do things to take care of yourself. Try to eat even if you don't feel like it, and sleep when you can. If you like to write, consider keeping a journal. Putting your thoughts and feelings in writing is very cathartic, and I think it's a good way to understand your emotions. Permit yourself to have moments of happiness or escape or joy, and you're allowed to. Every time I laugh, I feel my father and his love for humor and relationships. Finding joy and happiness is not disrespecting our dead, but it's a way of healing and honoring our loved one's memory. A big part of the grieving process is figuring out a world without that loved one. It is so important to reflect on the significance of this person in your life. And these revelations might come slowly and on a piece-by-piece basis as you make sense of this loss. Integrate ways that you want to remember this person in your life and how you want to honor and remember them as you move forward. Finally, if you know someone who is grieving, please remember to be patient with them and open. Know that they're trying to cope to the best of their abilities and the best way that they know how. Reach out to them, don't avoid them or ignore them. Just listen to the pain that someone is feeling and don't try to fix it for them. Comments like "don't be upset" or "you have to be strong" are not really helpful. It is important to just be with that person and listen to them. Many times we want people to feel normal and be back to their original state. However, their life has changed. And while our life might be going on as normal, their life hasn't. So instead, try to be with them and share stories and special memories that you might have about the bereaved. Normalize the person's feelings. As I mentioned before, people who are grieving go through a variety of different emotions, and they might feel like things don't make sense or they're going crazy. But validation and recognition of the loss helps. Encourage them to stay connected in ways that feel comfortable and make sense to them. Remember, this is about helping them and not about you. Lastly, please know that you are not alone in this. We are here to answer any questions that you might have. Speaking with a medical professional or a mental health provider is extremely helpful during this time. If you have questions, please reach out to Vinod and let him know. Thanks for listening, and I hope you all stay well and be safe.